I started carrying a small flashlight with me everywhere, even during the day. It's a strange habit, I know, and I didn't even realize I'd picked it up until someone pointed it out. It began shortly after I took that security job, late nights walking the floors of the old factory on the edge of town. It was supposed to be simple, just making sure no one trespassed in the place while it sat empty, waiting for demolition, but it changed something in me, that place. The chipped formica of the break room table felt cool under my forearm. I was checking the perimeter again, mostly just to stretch. 8 p.m. and still nothing. Just the hum of the building's ancient electrical system and the occasional settling groan. I'd started bringing a thermos of coffee, black, with 2 sugars. It helped with the monotony. Tonight it was lukewarm. I'd finished my sweep of the 3rd floor, the old weaving room, and was working my way back toward the main lobby when I noticed it. The door, the one off the main hallway on the 2nd floor, the one that leads to, well, it used to lead to employee services, I guess. It had never been unlocked since I started, but it was open, just a crack, maybe an inch. I distinctly remember checking it last Tuesday. Locked. I even jiggled the handle, because I was making a mental note of everything that needed attention when the demolition crew finally arrived. It wasn't sticking or anything, just solid. Now it was open. I shined the flashlight inside. Not an office, not anymore. Someone had arranged it, like a waiting room. Old chairs, not the office kind, more like visitor seating, lined the walls. A small table with magazines, old magazines, National Geographics from the 1970s, Reader's Digest, and a lamp, plugged in. It wasn't on, but the cord was neatly coiled. It smelled clean, like someone had dusted. It was odd, but honestly a little comforting. Maybe someone from the city, a building inspector or something, had been through and didn't bother to close the door all the way. It explained the dusting, the neatness. I closed it, double-checking the lock. It clicked. I continued my patrol but kept glancing back. The door stayed closed until, about 15 minutes later, I passed it again. Open. Just that same inch. I didn't even stop this time, just kept walking. Someone was messing with me. Probably those kids from town, daring each other to sneak in. It was annoying, but not exactly terrifying. Just weird. I started checking the door every 5 minutes. Just walking past, glancing. It was ridiculous, a waste of time. But I did it anyway. After 1 hour, it hadn't been touched. Maybe I'd spooked whoever it was. Maybe they'd realized a security guard actually was there. I even started to feel a little foolish. I was letting some teenagers get to me. Then I heard it. Not a footstep, not a voice, a click from inside the waiting room. Not the lock, something else. Like a chair scraping on the linoleum. It was faint, muffled, but definitely there. I stopped dead. I told myself it was the building settling. Old wood, metal expanding and contracting. This place was practically breathing with age. I kept walking, telling myself that, but I picked up the pace. I decided to skip the west wing on my next circuit. Just loop around the main floor, stay closer to the front entrance. If anything happened, I wanted to be able to get to my radio, to the gate. It felt safer. I passed the waiting room again, still closed, but the air felt different, staler. Then I saw it. A single playing card on the floor just outside the door. The Queen of Spades. I hadn't seen it there before. I definitely hadn't dropped it. I bent down, picked it up, and turned it over in my hand. Clean. No fingerprints, no smudges. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt placed. Like someone wanted me to find it. Maybe it was a message. Maybe Uwe, that groundskeeper who sometimes came by, was trying to tell me something about the building's history. He was a strange guy, always muttering about the old owners. It was a stretch, I knew, but it was better than the alternative. I put the card in my pocket. It felt wrong, keeping it, but I couldn't just leave it there. I did another sweep of the 2nd floor, mostly to avoid thinking about the card. The door to the employee area was open again. Just a crack, but open. I swear I'd left it shut. I was getting meticulous about it, checking the latch twice each time. It was just frustrating. I pushed it open, expecting the same weird, dusted stillness. Except this time, the radio was on. A static hiss mostly, but definitely on. It had been unplugged last time. Oldies, some crooner I didn't recognize. Low volume, like someone was testing it. I flipped the switch off, then went to unplug it. That's when I smelled it. Coffee, fresh brewed. It was faint, but unmistakable. And cinnamon. I scanned the room. Nothing. No cups, no pot, no nothing. Just the furniture, arranged like someone was expecting company. Then the door slammed shut. Not gently. It hit with a boom that rattled the windows. I grabbed for the handle, twisted, and it wouldn't budge. Locked. I rattled it, shoulder-checked it. Solid. Panic started to bubble in my chest. I yelled, "Hello?" Nothing. Just the hiss of the radio, now back on, louder. I didn't even think I started throwing things. A chipped ceramic ashtray, a stack of old magazines, anything I could get my hands on then. A shadow flickered under the door. Not a full silhouette, just a dark shape moving, and the smell of coffee got stronger, almost sickly sweet. It had to be Uwe. He'd been messing with me this whole time, some kind of elaborate prank, a really messed up one. I braced myself, ready to yell at him when he opened the door, but it never opened. Instead, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from inside the room, but not from the direction of the door. They were pacing, circling, and the radio switched to a news report, crackling with interference. Unidentified individual factory grounds report any suspicious activity. I dove behind the overturned desk, heart hammering. It wasn't Uwe. It couldn't be. I stayed put for, I don't know how long, just listening. Every creak of the building settling, and every gust of wind rattling the windows sounded like footsteps. Eventually, the first hint of gray started to bleed through the gaps in the boarded-up windows. That's when I risked a peek. Empty, still. I got out, slow, and checked the door again. Still locked. I just kicked it, hard. The wood splintered, but didn't give. I spent another 10 minutes on it. Adrenaline made me stupidly strong, until finally the frame cracked and I could shove it open. Daylight. It felt wrong. Too bright, too quiet, like a stage set after the actors had left. I called it in immediately. Everything. The room, the radio, the coffee smell, the locked door. I even mentioned the card. 2 officers arrived. They were young guys and looked bored mostly. They poked around, taking pictures. One of them, Lena, I think, kept sniffing the air like she could smell the coffee too. They found nothing. No footprints in the dust aside from mine. The door showed forced entry, of course. The radio worked. They confirmed, but no signal. No sign anyone had been there recently. Probably just kids messing around, Lena said, shrugging. Old building, lots of stories. I tried to explain the feeling, the wrongness of it, the deliberate setup. I even suggested maybe Uwe was involved, a sick joke, but they didn't seem interested in that line of questioning. They asked about my route, my logs. I showed them everything. I even brought my phone, showed them the photos I'd taken of the card, the room, but the pictures looked different, flatter. The light wasn't right. It didn't capture the atmosphere. It felt like I was trying to describe a dream, and they were looking for a broken window. Then Lena pointed out something. In the photos of the room on the wall above the radio, there was a faint outline, like something had been hanging there recently removed. They dusted for prints but came up with nothing usable. It was just gone. I started thinking maybe it was a former employee, someone who used to work here getting nostalgic, leaving little gifts. It felt less terrifying that way, less targeted. It's been years. I don't drive that way anymore. Not even close. There was a time I'd take the long route just to see if anything had changed, if someone had finally boarded up the windows, put a fence around the place. I stopped doing that. It felt expectant, like I was waiting for something else to happen. I quit security work shortly after. I couldn't explain it. Not really. The officers, Uwe and Lena, they filed their report. Case closed, vandalism, they said. Squatters. But it wasn't that. The room was too deliberate. The coffee smell, the card, the way everything was arranged, like someone was waiting. I think for a while, I convinced myself it was some kind of performance art. Some weird, elaborate prank. A group of students, maybe, from the art college a few towns over. They'd scouted the location, prepared the room, then just watched. It would explain the silence, the feeling of being observed. I kept looking for evidence of that. Flyers, online posts, anything, nothing. I still sometimes smell coffee. Not strong, just a phantom whiff. It usually happens when I'm sorting mail or kneeling in the garden. Always a faint, almost bitter aroma. And the cards. I haven't played cards since. Last week, I was cleaning out the garage and found an old box of tools. Underneath, tucked into the corner, was a single playing card. The Queen of Spades. It wasn't mine. I don't own a deck of cards. I just stared at it. It wasn't the same card, the one from the factory. This one was newer, cleaner, but it was the same suit, the same rank, and it smelled faintly of coffee. I still remember the chipped formica of the kitchen table. It was a pale yellow, with little flecks of brown showing through, and a perfect circle worn smooth where someone had always rested their coffee cup. I was there for the summer, taking care of a large empty house while the owners were abroad, a favor for a family friend. It was a quiet arrangement, mostly dusting and keeping the gardens tidy, and honestly, a welcome escape after a difficult semester. The place was enormous, though, and surprisingly empty of personal touches. The mornings were the best. Just quiet. I'd make coffee, sit on the back porch, and watch the garden. It was a proper garden, all neat rows and bursting with color. Silas, the guy who usually took care of it for the Birch family, really knew his stuff. I hadn't actually met him, not properly. Just a wave here and there when Mr. Birch was around, showing me where the tools were kept. I tried calling him again yesterday, just to ask about the roses. They were getting these weird brown spots, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't overwatering. No answer. I figured maybe he was on vacation or just didn't like answering his phone. Old people, you know? Then I found the notes. They were tucked inside the watering can, rolled up tight and secured with a rubber band. Just little scraps of paper, like he'd used whatever was handy. The handwriting was spidery and shaky. The first one just said, "Not the lilies." Then another, "They watch from the walls." And a third, "Don't trust the quiet." I almost laughed. It felt like some weird, lonely old man's ramblings. A little sad, honestly, probably just getting a bit confused. I thought maybe he'd been having trouble with pests, and the "they" referred to aphids or something. It was a big house, and he was alone a lot. I made a mental note to mention it to Mr. Birch when he got back. But then, this morning, there was one more. Tucked under the doormat this time, it said, simply, "You shouldn't be here." And the way it was written, it wasn't shaky anymore. It was deliberate, like someone had taken their time. I didn't call the police. Honestly, I didn't know what to say. Someone's leaving me threatening notes in the house I'm watching. It felt stupid, and Silas was already weird enough. I kept expecting to see him lurking, but he only came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he always announced himself. Still, I started locking the back door, even when I was just in the garden. Habit, I guess. Yesterday, I found one taped to the inside of the pantry door. "The roses need more attention." It wasn't the words themselves, it was the paper. It was the same kind of cheap-lined notebook paper as the first note, but this one had a faint smudge of dirt on it, like someone had been working in the garden, then just wiped their hands on the page. I started avoiding the rose garden. It felt foolish. I know, but something about that note, the dirt, it felt personal. Like they weren't just trying to scare me, they were trying to direct me. I spent the afternoon cleaning the kitchen, rearranging cupboards, anything to avoid being near the roses. Then, this morning, I went to get the mail and my car wasn't where I'd parked it. It was just gone. I walked back to the house, checking the security cameras, figuring maybe I'd misremembered where I'd left it. The cameras hadn't recorded anything unusual, just me walking to the mailbox. But as I rounded the corner of the house, I saw it, parked halfway down the driveway, facing away from the road, and a figure standing next to it. It was Glenn, from the hardware store. He'd helped me pick out some bulbs last week. He just stood there, watching me, and then slowly raised a hand and waved. He was holding something in his other hand, but I couldn't make it out. He didn't say anything. He just smiled, a really slow, deliberate smile. I think he was just being friendly. Offering to help me move the car, maybe, but he'd never looked at me like that before. And why would he be here so early? It's just odd. It's all just really odd. He was still there, Glenn, just standing by the gate, watching the road. I tried to act normal, waved, and he gave that same slow smile. It didn't reach his eyes. I unlocked the house, fumbling with the key, and the second I was inside, I locked it again. Every lock I was going to leave right then. Pack a bag, call a cab, just get out. But my bag was still in the garage, and the garage door wouldn't open with the remote. I tried the keypad. Nothing. That's when I saw it. A small, folded piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of Silas's old pickup. Another note. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The garden appreciates attention, and so do I. It wasn't about the garden anymore. It was personal. I went around back to the side door that leads into the kitchen, hoping it was unlocked. It was. But the kitchen window, the one looking out onto the rose bushes, was open, wide open, and the latch was broken. I didn't go in. I just backed away. Slowly, I called Glenn. He didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I remembered Mort, the groundskeeper. He lived in the little cottage on the property. I ran. Mort wasn't there, but the door was unlocked. His coffee cup was still on the table, half full, and on his workbench laid out neatly were my car keys. My car keys and a small, very sharp pruning knife. It was then I started to think maybe Glenn wasn't trying to help. Maybe he and Mort were in on this. Some kind of prank, a really messed up, unsettling prank. I grabbed my keys and ran back to the house, needing to get out now. The pickup truck was gone. I reported the truck stolen, of course. The police, a young deputy, barely out of high school, I guessed, asked about Glenn. They asked if I'd had any issues with anyone locally. I mentioned him, the way he'd stared, and the odd comments he'd made. The deputy said Glenn had a reputation for being eccentric, a loner, harmless. He took notes and promised to keep an eye out, but I could tell he didn't think it was a priority. I didn't stay. I just left. I packed a bag, what I could carry, and drove to Rowan's. Rowan, my sister, lives in the city, approximately 2 hours away. I told her a simplified version, something about feeling unsafe and a creepy local. She was furious I hadn't told her about the house-sitting gig in the first place. It was 1 week, maybe 10 days, at Rowan's. I tried to get back into a routine, but I kept looking over my shoulder. I even started checking the locks multiple times. Then the calls started. Not to my phone, but to Rowan's. They were silent calls, always late at night, just breathing. Heavy, deliberate breaths on the other end. I blocked the number each time, but it always came back as a different variation. Rowan thought I was imagining things, stressed. She said it was probably a wrong number, kids messing around. But it felt targeted. It felt like him. Like Glenn had somehow followed me. It didn't make sense. Why would he come all the way to the city? This wasn't about the house anymore, was it? It was about me. He wanted me to know he could find me, anywhere. I started thinking maybe he'd been watching me for a long time, even before the house. Maybe he'd seen me in town, recognized the car. He'd always seemed to know things, little details. Then, 1 week after I left Rowan's, a detective called. Not about the truck, about Mort. They'd found him, in the root cellar of the old cottage. He hadn't just disappeared, he'd been hidden, and the cellar had been modified, reinforced, like someone was living down there. The detective didn't say it outright, but I understood. It wasn't just a place to store potatoes. They let me go after 7 days. Just let me go. They said I wasn't a suspect, but they kept asking about Glenn. They asked about what I'd talked to him about, and if he'd mentioned anything unusual, I kept telling them it was nothing. It was small talk. He was just eager to please Rowan, always offering to help with things around the property. I still feel sick thinking about how easily I dismissed him. Vera, my sister, came and stayed with me for 30 days after that. She didn't push, she just was there. She made sure I ate and made me watch terrible reality TV. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made me freeze. Every car that slowed down outside my apartment made me freeze. I started seeing his face everywhere, in crowds, and reflected in windows. It was ridiculous. I tried to go back to work, but I kept flinching at shadows. I quit. Vera helped me find a job at a library, shelving books. It was quiet and predictable. It helped, a little. I haven't spoken to Rowan since. She sends cards. They are polite and distant. I think she feels guilty for hiring Glenn and for not seeing whatever this was. I don't blame her. It's not something you see coming. I started thinking he wasn't focused on the house, not really. It was about control, about needing to be known. It was about inserting himself into someone else's life, no matter how small the connection. I still jump when my phone rings. I still check the locks 3 times before bed, and I can't stop to help anyone with a flat tire anymore. Not even if they look genuinely stranded. It's stupid, I know, but every time I see someone on the side of the road, I just drive. I keep my hands on the wheel, and I just drive. It's just a thing I don't do. The chime of a distant air brake just now. It sounded exactly like the ones I heard that day. It brought it all back, surprisingly vivid. This happened a few years ago, late summer, on a cross-country drive I took after finishing a temporary job. I was heading back toward the coast, and my old car decided to give up the ghost at one of those highway rest areas, the kind with hardly any parking spaces and even fewer people. It was utterly quiet, almost eerily so, even before the trouble started. The tow truck hadn't shown. It had been 4 hours. Ira, the man who'd been trying to help, kept bringing me water. Bottled water, always cold, which was nice, but he'd been through 6 or 7 bottles himself, just standing around in the heat. He wasn't sweating much. That was the first thing I noticed. Really, everyone sweats a little, right? Even just standing. He kept fiddling with the distributor cap on my car, tightening things, then loosening them, then tightening again. He said something about needing to wake up the electrons. It sounded like nonsense, but he was so earnest, and he'd fixed the flat tire so quickly. I remembered mentioning, almost in passing to him, that I'd done a summer job at a tire shop in Maine, years ago. He'd latched onto that, asking a lot of questions about it. Now he was talking about tire pressure like he'd spent his life doing it. Then he started talking about Portland. He said it was a great city. Lots of history. I hadn't been to Portland in 6 years. That's where the job was, the one I'd mentioned. He hadn't asked where I'd been after Maine, just specifically about Portland. Okay, it's a popular city, still. He brought out a small metal toolbox. It was immaculate, everything perfectly arranged. He opened it, and there, tucked in the corner, was a postcard, a faded old postcard of the Portland headlight. He didn't seem to notice me staring at it. He just pulled out a tiny screwdriver. "Beautiful spot," he said, not looking up. "Always thought so. Reminds me of a place I knew." Back in, he trailed off, and I swear he glanced at the postcard before quickly looking back at the engine. Maybe he collects postcards. Maybe he just likes lighthouses. I probably overthink things. It's just been a long day. He offered me another water. Same plastic bottle. Cold condensation beating on the blue plastic. I waved it off. No thanks, really. I should probably try to call someone again. My phone still showed 0 bars. "Signal's spotty out here," Ira said, still fiddling with the distributor cap. He hadn't really done much, honestly, just touched things. "You headed far?" "West, through Jerome. Then up to, well, it doesn't matter now, does it?" I regretted the sharpness. He didn't react, just straightened up, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at me. Really looked at me. "Jerome," he said slowly. "Nice town. Used to know a woman there. Hilda. Ran a bakery. Best apple pie you ever tasted." He paused. "You ever spend time in Clio?" Clio, that was my grandfather's hometown. A place I hadn't even spoken about in years, hadn't thought about in years. I hadn't even realized I'd mentioned Jerome, which was close enough to Cleo to be a point of reference. How did you know that? He shrugged. Small world. People talk. It didn't feel right. I started gathering my things, shoving them back into the car. I think I'm going to try walking to that truck stop I saw back down the highway. Maybe they'll have a phone. He didn't try to stop me, but he was already walking around the front of my car when I got in. He just stood there, leaning against the hood, watching me. I drove slowly, keeping an eye in the rearview mirror. He stayed put, but when I glanced again a few minutes later, he was walking alongside the highway, matching my pace. It wasn't a jog, wasn't running, just walking. He must be trying to be polite, offer to walk with me to the truck stop. It was odd, but maybe that's just who he was, a helpful, eccentric guy. Then I remembered the postcard, and the way he'd said Cleo. I kept walking away from the highway toward where the truck stop should have been. It wasn't getting closer. Everything looked the same. Flat fields, scrubby trees, and him. Ira. Always him. He wasn't running and he wasn't chasing, just keeping pace. He was 50 yards back, but constantly there. It was infuriating and terrifying, obviously. I tried to speed up, started jogging. He matched my pace. That's when I realized he wasn't even breathing hard. I could see his chest, and the sun hit it, but it barely moved. It was wrong. I stopped. He stopped. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" He just shook his head, "Just making sure you're all right. It's a long walk." Long walk. He knew it was a long walk. He'd been letting me walk. It clicked then. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was testing me, seeing how far he could push me. Maybe he was some kind of weird survivalist. Thought I was soft, needed to toughen up. It was still creepy, but almost understandable. I started walking again, faster this time. And that's when I saw the house, not the truck stop, a house, a small rundown farmhouse, set back from the road. Smoke was curling from the chimney, and Ira suddenly wasn't 50 yards behind me anymore, but right beside me. He put a hand on my arm. "Opal's place," he said. "She'll help us." Before I could pull away, he was knocking on the door. A woman opened it, old, with eyes that didn't seem to focus. She looked right through me, then at Ira. "He brought you a guest, Opal?" she asked, her voice raspy. Ira nodded. "Car trouble. She needs a phone." Opal just stared at me. Then slowly, a smile stretched across her face. A smile that didn't reach her eyes, and behind me, I felt Ira's hand tighten on my arm, and he said very quietly, "She knows Jerome, you know, she knows everything." Ira insisted on driving me to the nearest town, Ward. He said it wasn't safe to walk, even during the day. He didn't say much, just kept his eyes on the road and his hands tight on the wheel. Every time I tried to ask about Jerome, or why Opal had looked at me like that, he would steer the conversation back to how lucky I was he'd been there. Lucky. That word felt wrong. Ward was smaller than I expected. It had one main street, a diner, a gas station, and a sheriff's office. I went straight for the sheriff's office. A woman named Kay was behind the desk. I told her everything about the car, about Ira, and about Opal and Jerome. I left out the part where I'd initially thought Ira was just being nice, figuring it made me sound less foolish. Kay listened, typing notes into a computer that looked older than I was. She ran Ira's name. "Ira Maddox," she said, looking at the screen. "Huh? What? What is it?" He's been through here before. A few times, actually. Always with someone different. He always needed a jump, a tow, something. Never any trouble, just passing through. She paused, scrolling. It says here he used to work at the state hospital up near Cleo as an orderly. An orderly? That explained the way he just knew how to handle me. How calm he was. He was used to dealing with people who were distressed. Maybe he just liked helping people, and Opal was a confused old woman. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. Kay said they'd put out an all-points bulletin, just in case. But she didn't seem worried. "He's probably just a bit of a drifter," she said. "Nothing to get worked up about." She gave me a ride back to where my car was, which Ira had promised to fix. He was there, under the hood, looking focused. He didn't meet my eyes. The car started on the first try. He handed me the keys, a small, tight smile on his face. "All set." It's been years. I still think about Ira Maddox, though not constantly. It's more like a low hum, a frequency I didn't even know existed until he tuned it in. I tried looking him up after, of course, just a name and a vague description, and the state hospital near Clio, nothing. No records of an Ira Maddox ever working there. Kay at the ward sheriff's office said she'd run it again, but she sounded tired of the whole thing, like I was bothering her with a ghost story. I kept driving. Obviously, I had to. I got back on the highway headed towards Reno, but I found myself checking my rearview mirror constantly. Not looking for anyone, just checking. And I started taking different routes, even if they were longer. I avoided two-lane highways if I could. It wasn't fear. Exactly. More like a need to control the space around me. I figured it was the isolation of that stretch of road. The way he just appeared, he knew my car was broken down, knew exactly what it needed. He was just prepared. A good Samaritan with a knack for engines and a lonely life. Maybe he traveled specifically to help people. A weird, quiet purpose. It felt better than the alternative. I still do it. You know, when someone gets too close in a parking lot or stands behind me in line at the grocery store, I subtly shift my weight. I angle myself so I can see their hands. Not a conscious thought, just a reflex. I'm reaching for my keys before I even realize it. Fingers already wrapping around the metal, just in case. It's a stupid thing, I know, but I can't seem to stop.